Welcome to Islamic Life Coach School podcast. Apply tools that you learn in this podcast and your life will be unrecognizably successful. Now your host, Dr. Kamal Akhtar.
Hello everyone. Peace and blessings be upon all of you. It is so good to be here today because I'm super excited to introduce you to my podcast guest today, Sister Sumayah Hassan. Yes, you heard me correctly. Sister Sumayah Hassan is joining us today for a beautiful faith-based relationship conversation. She is none other than the co-host of Honest Tea Talk. In her words, she is a faith-based relationship mentor living in London, UK with clients globally. She has created a haven for heartbreak to offer Muslim women a safe place to heal, develop emotional and relational intelligence. She is a mom to 4 small humans, also affectionately known as the party people. She loves the Quran and describes it as a part of her. She can't imagine the world without it. She offers workshops on building a relationship with the Book of Allah at Recite and Reflect. Like I said, she's also a co-host on Honest Tea Talk and the voice behind her own podcast, Sincerely Sumayah. Without further delay, I welcome you to listen to an invigorating interview with Sister Sumayah Hassan. As always, please listen for useful thoughts that you can borrow. Inshallah, you guys will benefit a lot from this. Assalamu alaikum. I have Sister Sumayah Hassan with me, and I am so honored to speak to you, meet you for the first time face to face. I've been following you for, don't even want to admit for how long, really. All of your work, including starting with Honest Tea Talk, is when I got introduced to your work, has been extremely influential. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, I can't wait to pick your brain, but let's just get started with telling me a little bit in your own words what you do, why you do it.
So I am a relationship mentor and I work with Muslim women. I started a project called Haven for Heartbreak to work with women who are going through heartbreak in the Muslim community. And this was born out of my own experience and seeing what it's like in that environment, and kind of, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to be surrounded by amazing sisters. And I know that that's not something that everyone has. And so when I opened up the opportunity, it started organically with sisters kind of saying, you know, there's a sister who's really struggling. Do you think you can speak to her? And it just kind of blossomed from there and grew. I am a mom of 4, alhamdulillah. I am an American and I live in London and have clients all around the world, alhamdulillah.
SubhanAllah, this is awesome. So you spoke about heartbreak, and that seems to be where your work seems to revolve around. How would you define heartbreak, or how does that woman present to you that is experiencing that heartbreak?
The thing that I actually learned was that it's a really broad definition. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different reasons why people come, and it's essentially someone who's struggling with their circumstances. They're usually in survival mode. They're struggling to cope. There's a lot of shame and uncertainty around what's going on with them. And I think one of the key things that unifies them, like irrespective of the reason, is that they feel the sense of aloneness and that they're not able to reach out to their immediate circle for support, either because they're too close to the situation, they're unable to advise them in an objective and unbiased way, or they sometimes feel as though because their family members aren't experiencing what they're going through, they kind of want to rush them out of it. Hurry up, aren't you over this yet? Aren't you done? Why are you still having such a hard time? And I think having a kind of external support is important at that time for them, especially if it's someone who's been through what they've been through or can relate and support them specifically through that.
Yeah. And that support is so important because, like you say, this type of an experience of heartbreak is very isolating, and then you lose your own objectivity. You feel like you're the only person going through this, and it's important to have a professional show you that there is a support network for you. If anything, you yourself and your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if everything else fails, is there. And then for them to, I guess, start healing inside out and seeing that they do have a support network where they originally thought they might not have had it. And you even said when you started in your own career that you had a support network of your own sister, which helped you blossom. So why this career? I think, alhamdulillah, as women in developed countries, we have a lot of options. Why this line of work?
So this is what I'm doing for now. That's the story of my life. It's you just go, from, I don't believe that there's one thing that I'll probably do for the rest of my life. I think that as I go through my life, I feel called or drawn to or guided to the next thing. So initially, on like my presence on social media started teaching recite and reflect, doing Quran and tadabbur. And even though that was a religious class, essentially what came to be when we talk about connecting with the Quran was that everybody was bringing their personal challenges and life issues to the process, because at the end of the day, we're people, and that's our real life, is what we're going through on a day-to-day basis. And going through this experience myself, I transitioned from being a thinking person who's strictly, rational and existed in my mind, to coming into my own emotions and going through this whole process. And subhanAllah, when something like this happens to you, I think it's very easy to feel that this is just a terrible thing that's happening to me. And that in my experience in my life and with the people I've seen around me, it almost always is guiding you to something more. It's training you, it's teaching you, it's shaping you into the next thing. So for me, I just flow with what comes next. And this was where I came to. The work around relationships and healing work became the next step for me. I didn't seek it out. It just, I came to it. It became the next thing. So that's how I ended up here.
It's fascinating because a lot of people will come and say, oh, this was my childhood dream. This is something I always wanted to do. And it's even more refreshing to notice that you're kind of go with the flow kind of person. You're so much at ease with that, because there's a certain rigidity in a person who's strictly, let's say, coming from a rational perspective. I used to do that, but now I don't do this. Why don't I do that? And there's so much questioning, always second guessing of, is this the right thing to do? Should I be doing something other than what I'm already doing? So it's always something, finding a fault with what is, rather than just embracing where you are and becoming good at what you're doing, and just accepting the things as they are around you. And it's such a, there's such a fluidity and a flexibility and almost a femininity to that quality. And that's really refreshing to notice. So you also mentioned being strictly of a rational mind and then coming to emotional work, which is something I talk about a lot in this podcast. And that was definitely a journey for me, journey towards improvement that has definitely overall improved my well-being. When people are originally starting with this work, especially if they have a history of relational trauma, they seem to be disconnected from their emotions, and they are living head and body separate and just mostly living in their thoughts and looping in rationalization of their circumstances. How can they first help to transition themselves? Let's say they don't have access to a coach or a mentor like yourself. How can they help themselves ease into just experiencing their body, and how would they know what is right or not?
That's an excellent question. I think the beginning of everything is just cultivating a basic sense of awareness, learning to pay attention. For me, I felt as though I was feeling everything, but I was disconnected from it. And like you said, focused on doing all the time. I was not grounded in my body. I was not aware of my patterns or anything that was happening internally. I think I just stayed busy enough to not have to look at it or face it. So I think building a basic sense of awareness, learning to pay attention to what's going on inside, and kind of cultivating a pause. For me, that started with meditation, just training myself to be still enough to notice. The simple practice, in the beginning of a meditation, of doing like a body scan and just paying attention, learning how to move your attention from your breath to sound outside of your body, and just learning how to tune into what's going on inside. And I think the next kind of big breakthrough for me was doing inner child work, connecting with, you know, the younger version of me. I felt like my child self is this bundle of emotions. Like it's as if she's all feeling and the adult was all thinking. So getting in touch with that was a huge thing. It was like the floodgates opened.
I love the way you describe it, because children speak the language of emotions. They can't rationalize. They don't have language, but they communicate through their emotions. And it's always a solid grounding to want to go back to that and just to rediscover what you lost while you were developing a rational brain, because language kind of suppresses that. And this whole notion of not being able to get in touch with your emotions, because first you want to just suppress them by doing, always staying busy, and then becoming afraid of the stillness because you either get labeled as lazy. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Either by external criticism or your own internal voices criticism. And besides that, it develops over time, develops into a condition of alexithymia, where you can't even recognize an emotion, maybe just basic emotions like sadness, happiness, fear. But above that, like emotions create your life, you completely lose the plot on trying to create a wonderful, a full spectrum life. And to me, that was my difficulty as well. It was hard for me to slow down enough to notice things happening with my body. Just being still would, as you referred to, it would provoke a sympathetic response in me. It'd be like fight and flight. It'd be like, okay, no, this is not correct. I'm not used to this. Let's get out of here. So it took, again, a mentor, therapy, coaching work, a lot of that type of support to be able to get here.
No, I was going to say, for people who are thinkers, who are achievers, especially like, you know, our upbringing, like in the West, especially, I think we are kind of raised to do well in school and our career. Like we're pushed in that direction, and we're celebrated for our achievements, and we're celebrated for actually staying in our minds. It's encouraged to, you know, having an emotional outburst or reacting to things or being too easily moved is considered a flaw. So we were kind of doing what we were taught to do, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's just the societal culture at large is designed to do that. It's also interesting that you use the word achiever, because it's not like once you become more emotionally in tune with your body, you are not an achiever anymore. You don't lose that type of talent. It's just a little bit more of a wholesome approach. And it's not just hustle mentality. It's not just, okay, doing. It's also listening to yourself and moving forward with mindfulness.
Absolutely.
What would you say is something that people misunderstand the most about your work?
Funnily enough, I'd say that because I work with women, people seem to assume that I'm against men, that my work is about kind of getting women to leave their marriages or something. And it couldn't be further from the truth. You know, for the record, I have nothing against men, you know. I have a son and a dad and brother. It's I think that it's funny that they feel compelled to try and make themselves the center of the story, but it's not really about, you know, the other people. When someone comes to work on themselves, it's about the individual who's coming, and their development and their growth is going to impact their relationships and everything else after that. So I think that's a big one. Another one is probably that any kind of, you know, healing work or relational work comes in a time of crisis. That when there's about to be a divorce, now we should talk about getting help. When there's about to be a breakdown or something drastic happens, you know, in a marriage or in a relationship, people feel as though now is the time to try and patch it up, instead of seeing it as an ongoing way of looking after yourself. Like you have a personal trainer, a dermatologist, and a therapist. Like it should just be a matter of course. But I think we're getting there culturally in some circles, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, slowly but surely, I think. I mean, I try to do my part. I know you're doing your part. Speak as much as we can about our work and what we offer. And it's fascinating also that you say that it's not about completely disconnecting from men or isolating men. It's about empowering women. It's just because you're empowering one does not mean you're disempowering the other. If anything, an empowered woman can probably bring a lot more strength to the relationship. And that's something that I also see a lot. And that ayah comes to mind in Surah Nisa, where it says that men are appointed qawam over you, and a lot of times it gets mistranslated as controller when it's supposed to be maintainer or provider. And it really stems from the provider's own insecurity. If they're bringing that to the relationship, then it becomes about controlling the other person in the relationship. Is that something you experience in your work?
I think that as like a social commentary, I think it rings really true in the sense that there is a lot of, I'd almost call it like you feel like there's this power struggle, there's a grapple for control. And it's something I see even in young adults who aren't even married yet, talking about the process of getting married. It's this great negotiation about mahar and rights, and it's you haven't even gotten into a relationship and you already want to argue about what you're going to get and what you have to give, and trying to get away with the minimum amount and feeling like you're not being taken advantage of. And I just think that both sides have kind of taken a posture of fear. It's not a partnership. We're not coming together to build our future. It's more like, I have to protect myself so you don't take advantage of me. And this is before even getting married. And I do think that, unfortunately, there's a history of using religious scripture, or, I think on the women's part, a lack of knowledge and understanding of what these things really mean, what these ayat mean, what the rights of a woman are, that they're being taken advantage of in the name of the faith.
Right.
And that's spiritual abuse, and it's unfortunate that it happens, but I think that it's definitely real.
Based on what you said about problems arising before they even get married, how strong of a proponent are you of, let's say, premarital counseling?
I think if it's in the right hands, it's great. I think if they're working with someone who is an expert in this and who's actually talking about the day-to-day and some of the core issues around compatibility, people's routines, upbringing, expectations, alignment around finances, and goals and vision for the future, having a real conversation. Because I have also seen the other kind of premarital counseling, which is just like a nice chat with the imam. Why do we get married? We want to go to Jannah. Like very, very superficial kind of, we just it's a nice activity, but I don't know how effective it is in preparing anyone for the reality of what they're about to set into. And I think that, in the work that you do and the work that I do, speaking about the reality of what a marriage is, to temper the next generation's expectations. And I think just be more honest about what marriage actually is, instead of presenting it as this cure-all and, the highest possible goal that a young person could aspire to in their lifetime, especially our daughters. Telling them that is their sole focus and like purpose for existence, like you had mentioned. So yeah, I think there's a lot that needs to change around how we speak about it.
Yeah, putting just that marital relationship on a pedestal and not really telling our girls, our daughters, our young sisters that it doesn't always meet your expectations, because other person coming to the relationship is also a human being. And they are their own mixed bag of the good and the bad, just like you are your own mixed bag of the good and the bad. And when you come in to a relationship thinking that this person is just going to solve all of your problems, it puts a lot of undue burden on the relationship itself. And like you say, then you become more walled off, more protective, more of a controlled stance, rather than, okay, I'm fulfilled the way I am. Let me see what I can bring to the relationship to strengthen it. Because then it becomes about family unit is basically a cultural unit. It becomes about the next generation, how dharma then proceeds from there on, which is why I do believe, which is why it's so heavily emphasized in our tradition to maintain these ties and to protect them. But again, not at a cost of the guise of abuse, absolutely, not at a cost of the mental health or well-being of the woman or the man in the relationship. What do you personally do for your, let's say, personal development outside of all of these endeavors?
I am constantly learning. I'm constantly doing something. It's I can't sit for very long without being in the middle of a project or working on something. I do love personal development. I read a ton. I listen to podcasts. I like to keep my pulse on the conversation and what's going on. Not that I take on everything that I hear wholesale, but just to be able to, even if I don't necessarily agree, to be able to kind of run through. It's really important to me. I've constantly, I'm working on a new version of myself, Sumayah 7.0, I like an identity-based approach. I feel like that works best for me. I am the kind of person who is very important to me. And I'm constantly refining and editing things out and adding things in. And it's this ongoing project.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. This identity-based type of learning, I think it's excellent because, like you say, as long as it's not rigid, as long as you're constantly redefining based on what you've learned, what you think is the right next step. And I am a big proponent of that also. I teach that quite very details in my podcast myself. So I was listening to one of your recent podcasts, and you mentioned that how people mistakenly replace an entire village with one person in a relationship, and they expect them to fulfill our needs. And that, I think, was so beautifully worded, and it kind of stuck with me. And I wanted you to elaborate on that a little bit more, of how we can cultivate relationships with our daughters, with our young sisters, so they don't go into marriage or a relationship or looking for a partner expecting these or having these types of false notions that are based on really weak foundations of just societal expectations. How can we kind of give them a more solid faith-based grounding?
That's a beautiful question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is modeling, just right out the gate. Them being able to look at mom, look at their aunties, look at their elders and the people around them and see that they have healthy relationships. I think for many people, when you speak to them and you ask them, did you see healthy marital relationships growing up? Can you think of someone in your mind that jumps to mind as a healthy marriage, as a beautiful connection? It's not as straightforward and easy for them to do as we would hope. So I think for us to actually live that first and be able to show them what's normal and what's acceptable, I think that leaning on one person, is sometimes it's culturally encouraged. Like it's, sometimes you're told that once you become a married woman's place is her home, this type of language. And I think that it leads to a lot of women reaching a point where they have their families, they have their homes, but they've let go of so much of who they are as people. They've let go of their interests, hobbies, certain aspects of their personality. They kind of edit themselves down to like a shadow of what they were before. And that is the worst possible message that we could be giving our girls, is that it's not acceptable for them to be whole and to be their own person. I think that, and as well as, because it's two-sided, if she's a wife who feels that she should be dedicating her entire life to the marriage, then she would also feel slighted when her husband is not doing the same and he has his life, even though males are encouraged to kind of have their own world. And, he plays basketball on Saturdays and he does Juma with he's allowed, it's acceptable. But for her, I think it would lead to that resentment because she doesn't have permission to do it herself. So it would have that positive impact, like you were saying in the beginning. When you take care of yourself and you have your boundaries in the right place, I think it has a knock-on effect in every area.
Yeah. Modeling, I think, is a very good start for anybody thinking along these lines. But when you say modeling, what comes to my mind is this era of generational trauma, especially in the Muslim Ummah, where we learn these types of self-limiting patterns from our moms, from our aunties, from our older cousins. But it's always good for, like you say, it's always good to kind of provoke that thought process, that just question, even if it's coming from your most loved ones that you're supposed to be breathing, eating, living, and dying in your husband's house from now on. There is another possibility, and you don't have to use that as just a license to put up with abuse. You have other opportunities. So there's a lot of questioning of what narrative you've been taught all your life, and really giving yourself permission to question it, just because it came from somebody older than you, just because you think they're more experienced. Give yourself permission to question it, and be present with that type of cognitive dissonance, and find a support network that helps you grow as a person, rather than just completely be buried in this rubble of whatever's being thrown at you.
I love that. And I think also it's a fine and important point to mention what you just said about your elders and parents. One of the things that I come up against with client work is that people feel it's a betrayal to their parents if they were to consider traumatic experiences or areas where they struggled or where their parents could have done better. And like you said, to be able to question something that was in the family culture a norm feels like they're being critical or disrespectful to their parents. And so they don't want to explore that. And it's always about saying, you know, we are objectively looking at a historical event. It's not to point fingers or lay blame or say that your parents are bad people. As human beings, you went through a particular experience, and now you're learning how to handle it and attach meaning in a positive way. So, you know, asking these questions is not a sign of disrespect or unkindness towards your elders or parents.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction to make. And I should mention, it's actually classic black and white thinking, which when I teach somebody to empower themselves, they think that by extension, I'm either asking them to leave their husband or be disrespectful to their parents or something of the sorts, which is not at all what I'm saying. And then we kind of reconcile it in the middle, but that between this black and white, there's a lot of gray that we haven't explored. How can you voice your own opinion and be respectful to your parents? Maybe they're not used to ever hearing somebody standing up for themselves. Maybe it will be refreshing for them that you are such a strong woman, or becoming a strong young lady, or just asking for your basic rights from your husband, if that's what it comes down to. And this whole notion that when you are asking for something that is your right, you are being critical or disrespectful of somebody who didn't teach you these basic things. And a lot of it is kind of, in my opinion, rooted in the same fear-based mentality, where any independence of a woman is kind of perceived as, oh, she doesn't know how to handle her own mistakes, or she doesn't know how to carry herself in the world. Or if she's independent, that's kind of a open invitation to, let's say, promiscuity or not being modest, especially with financial independence. A lot of that is feared that, okay, as long as she has, or as soon as she gains some financial independence, she might make mistakes that are irreversible. What do you think you have to say when it comes to mentality like that?
I think, like you said, it's a lot of fears that are passed down and may not be based on experience or reality. I think it is also, part of it is kind of the community and the society attaches these negative connotations to things, like you said, somebody having financial independence or being educated, or, you know, things that they consider to be like a gateway to problematic behavior, or becoming a particular kind of, you know, troublesome woman, or whatever they would call it. And I think that it doesn't necessarily need to be the case, like you said, with the black and white thinking. And it's kind of like that is the critical voice of people who like to maintain the status quo and keep everyone in line. It just sounds like what they would say to someone who tries to do something that they consider to be out of the norm or the ordinary, or, you know, we never used to say this or do this or make these decisions like you are. So that means that what you're doing is wrong and thus unacceptable. But I think that, you know, I'm grateful that this generation is definitely, you know, the young adults that are definitely kind of taking a step, and there is a sense that they are different than those before. And they feel almost, I think, entitled in some ways to have this difference, which is a good thing. And I feel maybe our generation was in between. We were between the old and the new. And so maybe they're going to have a head start on that. But I think it's really, really important to, you know, as individuals, especially as women, to be able to kind of tune into their intuition and get really clear about what they want and what they need, because there's a lot of you know, conflicting voices and advisors and people who are weighing in on your decision making. And so many of us have been raised in an environment where we weren't taught to have an opinion and speak up and check in with how we feel and what we need. And so we're not used to it, and it may feel strange, but with practice, you will learn to tune in to what's going on for you, because it's really hard, I think, to navigate life and make huge decisions if you don't know how to listen to yourself, if you don't know what you actually want.
Yeah. Like you say, they kind of shave themselves off to fit in to what everyone else is asking them to do, and they become a shadow of themselves, like you had just said. And in that, trying to fit that box of what the society expects you to fit, you lose track of how to listen to your own voice, even if it's screaming at you. And then you forget to trust yourself, and then you blame yourself for making humanly mistakes, which everyone makes, including men, everyone makes humanly. What do you think right now is the most common problem that you're presented with in your work when it comes to relationships?
I think a lot of people are, and this is the young adults, are coming into an age and stage where they are ready to get married, to connect, to get started. Many of them haven't had relationships in the past, so this is their first time around, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate this process. Most of them are in the West, Muslim families, and they have to reconcile between their culture and their environment, feeling like they were trying to do the right thing by, you know, being, you know, a good girl, and getting up to this stage and feeling that they're struggling when it comes to finding someone. And even if they are meeting people, being able to speak up about what's a priority for them, dealing with pressure from family to make a decision one way or the other, criteria, standards. I think all of these are really big points right now.
Yeah. Like you say, I think a lot of that gap is closing with the coming up generation. It's important because we sort of kind of a stepstone for them, our generation, and then they have more access to information. So it's a good thing in a way, depending on how you use it. It can always be a great thing if you're able to make sense of everything that's out there and reconcile your religious values with the environment. Before we end this, and it's been such an honor and such a delight speaking to you. So very insightful. It's opening so many gates in my head to continue to explore more of these topics. I want to ask you one last thing is, when you're carrying yourself, what is one thought that comes to you that you hang on to the most, or that you revisit, or kind of to anchor yourself again and again when you're creating a life that you're currently living? What do you keep going back to as a sentence, or as a thought, or as a belief system that you think might help our listeners?
I think one thing that I go back to is being in integrity with Allah, with myself, feeling that I'm living in a way that's true, that's correct. I feel very strongly about knowing that Allah sees me and knows me. And I think it grounds me in the sense that whatever people outside of you think of you or say or make of you, I feel like I know what I'm really about. And I know that Allah knows what I'm really made of. And after that, being able to look in the mirror. I really struggle with feeling like I'm out of alignment or I'm living in a way that's not true to form. And that is important to me. You know, you should be making life decisions as much as humanly possible to the extent that you feel that you are comfortable in yourself, you did the best you could, and you can look yourself in the mirror. You are not betraying yourself, you're not selling yourself short, letting yourself down, and you're not putting other people's requests, demands, definitions above what you know inside of yourself to be real and true. And it goes back to being connected to intuition, awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just feeling like I'm doing my square best.
Wow, mashallah. That's very interesting also, because it's something that we have to work on. It's a constant practice. It's a skill to develop. It doesn't happen overnight, especially if you haven't listened to yourself your entire life. But going back to listening to yourself and just fine-tuning what worked, what didn't work, and then forgiving mistakes in the process and having tawakkul that whatever happens, whatever you decide, nothing really wrong ever happens. Even if a decision seems wrong, everything's eventually from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and trusting yourself within the process. And interesting that in the entire thought process that you just gave me, it was about trusting yourself and then focusing it back on Allah and just going back and forth, which is very much in line with what I teach as well. And it's again refreshing to notice that there are people out there that are teaching this and perpetuating this type of mentality, and really for the betterment of the ummah, inshallah. All right.
Inshallah. I just wanted to add that I so appreciated when I was listening to your podcast that I felt your level of care and concern for your community and your listeners. And I don't go on a lot of shows. I reject most of my invitations to do things, but true to form, I was listening to you and I felt that you care deeply about them, and your work is truly about uplifting them and making their lives better in a way that matters. I could hear it in your voice. I could hear it in your words. And I can't tell you how many people who are in the coaching and personal development sphere are really business people about selling a product and pushing something. And I did not feel that. I was happy to hear every time you mentioned a workshop, every time you mentioned something you taught. And I thought, I feel comfortable here, and your space feels welcome and it feels true. And I wanted to commend you for that.
Oh my God, thank you so much. That is so sweet of you. You, like I said in the beginning, if it didn't get recorded, you're a beautiful soul inside out. And your compliments just prove that, mashallah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That is my work. That is my duty. I feel in my own personal development journey, I don't sit still either. And I think this is the next stage in my life where I've gone through the grind of do, always be proving yourself, always proving yourself worth to others. And it was just like breaking me apart. And when I came to this work, I was like, this cannot be kept a secret. And how can I make it available to the masses and not be about just earning or making it a hobby or anything of the sorts? Like this cannot stay on the sidelines. And I dedicated a major part of my life to this work after that. And I appreciate your compliments on that. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome.
As you guys heard, that was my conversation with Sister Sumayah Hassan. She showered me with her wisdom, her beautiful words, her compliments, all out of the goodness of her heart. And may Allah bless her and her work. And I pray you guys found it beneficial. All of her work is available online. I will leave the links in the show notes, including her Haven for Heartbreak offer for Muslim women and her Quran workshops, including her ebook where she shares pearls of wisdom from the Quran. I had a chance to read it on my flight one day. It's a truly phenomenal resource. Utilize the links in the show notes, and I hope you guys get to implement all of the beautiful thoughts that she shared with us. Remember, the difference between you and your success is the gap of the mindset, and the mindset is practiced one thought at a time. So if anything, just adopt one thought out of this whole podcast, and inshallah, over time, piling up these thoughts is going to create a success mindset. Please keep me in your du'as. I will talk to you guys next time. If you're interested in getting coached by me, I'm offering a very affordable opportunity to do that with Wisdom Wednesdays. This is not a course, not a lecture. This is an opportunity for live coaching, real change with Islamic adab and etiquette. You do not need more information. You actually need a space to create change. At $19.99 a month, which is the price of takeout dinner, you as a Muslim woman will create confidence, intimacy, and connection without shame or fear of judgment, because your privacy is my highest priority. So join at www.islamiclifecoachschool.com, resources, Wisdom Wednesdays. I'll see you inside, inshallah.